Would you like to go over your stuff or dive into the code?
Either or works for me.
Let's finish up on any of your stuff that you've
Okay.
done previously that might need attention.
And close up this desk and share the screen. Cool. Cool. Yeah, so I went through quite a few things in the last 2 weeks. And here they are. So first, this is in random order, but I was curious. You have this claim in the Miro graph, this one here, where keto is an exception due to a shorter lipid life cycle. And I was wondering where you found that, or how we came to that conclusion. Like the conclusion that what specifically suggests that keto lowers residence time. Because I think the claim that lowered residence time would lower the risk. But what specifically, like how does keto do that? And I couldn't seem to find
No, and
that.
there probably isn't any. Um, and I kind of suspect whenever you're digging into a debate, you're going to reach the end of what people have talked about.
Yeah.
So this is just my interpretation of um what people are getting at of a mechanistic way of what it's doing, and probably most closely from gosh, what's his name, that software programmer that we had the website of the
Feldman?
cholesterol code.
No. Yeah.
Yeah,
Feldman.
so the
David
work he
Feldman.
was doing and his researcher reading through their description of everything, that kind of felt like what they were stumbling around trying to say. But they don't actually button it up nice anywhere saying what it is.
Yeah.
So there may not be anything we could link to. Actually, I don't know what study I have linked there.
This
Is,
one.
is that anything, or did I just copy and paste and not remove it?
I was testing Claude 2 there, so I loaded the
Oh,
study in and asked it specifically for that claim, and it couldn't find that claim exactly. But this
yeah,
is
yeah. I think somewhere in my messages I did some like internet searches where I said, has there been any tests? And there was a study where they tested they might call it resident
yeah,
residency or whatever they call it.
residence time.
Residence time. Um yeah, so it's also possible that ChatGPT was hallucinating. And
This
maybe no one's
is
tested for that.
yeah,
But
but this is
yeah,
it's an
so
interesting place to go down for sure.
yeah. Yeah, I guess one of the problems is I don't know. I haven't really encountered this yet, so to know where to go with the debate at that level. I mean, so the move from the pro side is, hey, well, your things and your if we're talking about it's oxidation, and oxidation takes time, and it happens the more things are in existence, the more likely they're going to oxidize. If in keto you're using, and this is the problem where insulin resistance, the term gets bantered around and they say keto people have higher insulin resistance, but that's not actually true. Your so mechanistically you have all these lipids in your bloodstream and your cells are not taking them up. So it makes sense that they're just hanging out in the bloodstream. But when you're in
Right.
ketosis, you're using the fat and there's more there because you don't have any sugar. So your body produces more lipids to give you the energy to do your day.
Yeah. Right.
Um,
Yeah.
so it just kind of makes intuitive sense. That doesn't mean it's true.
Yeah,
Um,
and I think when I recall doing something with ChatGPT saying like, how would you figure this out? Or and I think it said something like even the method in which we would test the residency time is difficult in and of itself. Like, how do you even measure specifically how long this, LDL cholesterol has stayed in your bloodstream? So I found that was interesting. But like you said, intuitively, I think it does make sense.
yeah. So the question, I mean, let's assume that we can't. Um, we, I mean, I. So did you actually just look around for any studies that might, like I was just Googling
I,
and
I thought I did,
I
but I
see
don't.
residence time of low density lipoprotein in the normal and atherosclerotic rabbit aorta. But
That sounds promising.
yeah, except that, it's, mhm. I mean, it doesn't measure the difference between, someone who's metabolizing fat versus carb metabolizing. Anyways, so it might be worth doing so a look around, just see if I mean, you already tried, but maybe a little bit more just to see if we can find anyone that may have been digging in this rabbit hole. Other than that, it it may just be we just need to figure out what would the move be of the other team. What would be a reasonable move when you see a claim like that? It's like the move could be like there are no studies that show whether that's true.
Mhm. Yeah.
um, but that doesn't make it, that shouldn't counter it completely, right? I mean, it's still a hypothesis. It still could be true. I don't it explains it explains all the it explains everything basically. Um because they actually don't have, like, do they have a competing mechanistic explanation? Like if there isn't a competing mechanistic explanation, then you know, it's not like you assume it's true, but you can't assume it's not true,
Mhm.
or it'd be equally inaccurate. So I don't even know what the next move would be. I almost feel like we just need to put it out there and stop the debate at that point, and then let's see what people say. Um, and just
One thing
never do
they
the next move.
one thing they could do is reference like, and this is another one of my bullets here is this. I was looking for this mortality chart based on um, people in saturated fat, and is there a chart that shows all the different studies across, um, like a meta study of the actual increased mortality rate or increased events of, or is it just all assumed risk? And if those charts say that high saturated fat or keto diet doesn't actually include mortality events, maybe you point to that saying, well, even if we do have higher LDLC, my theory is that, let's say, like the person saying, my theory is the residence time is quicker, so it actually doesn't affect it, and this is proven by the fact that it doesn't increase mortality. Like that could maybe be the line in which they prove their claim.
Say that one more time.
Yeah. So if there's no direct evidence that increased diet of saturated fat, like keto diet, actually increases mortality rates or actual recorded events of
Yeah.
CVD,
Yeah. See
then
yeah. The Yeah, I'm pretty sure, although we could look, there aren't any studies done on whether people on keto have a lower mortality.
Mhm.
Like, it'd be nice if someone would do that. Now, I guess the problem is that they can't, and they say that you can't do a study because the evidence is so strong that of the correlation between saturated fats and cardiovascular disease that you would be putting people's lives at risk.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So you
I'm
can't do a
aware.
random control trial. I guess you could do an observational trial because people are doing it. Right. You just have to gather it, but we would need to wait 10 years for that. So we could look for that study. But the problem is what we're at the situation is they're saying there's a correlation and we can say, well, there's no evidence that that correlation stands for people who are on this diet. Right. Because you're talking about correlation. You're not talking about, you don't know the causal chain.
Mhm, mhm.
So you can't, it's not proof that they would do that. But in the absence of evidence, it's kind of like, well, yeah, that's not a very strong claim because evidence, absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I will take a look and see if I can dig up anything where Feldman says it and what he's referencing, and double check specifically what I found, because I don't think I wrote it down in here that I can see, but I found my ChatGPT question where I'm asking, I asked ChatGPT to format a question that I could ask Elicit to search through all their database for that specific thing. Like, what is the relation between residence time and atherosclerosis? And does keto promote shorter lipid life cycle? So I have evidence that I did this search, but I don't know where I have it specifically. My lack of results written down here in this graph. So I'll just
Yeah,
quickly
because
redo
if
that.
I remember correctly, and I think it's in one of the things, there are ways to test it. But it's
Right.
hard because you have to like inject people with something like a radioactive dye or something like that. Then you measure their blood over several periods. You have to do it on a person that's in ketosis and a person that not. And you could imagine that'd be extremely expensive to get over 100 people to do
Yeah.
that.
And that's do what I recall him saying. It wasn't that you couldn't, but it just that it was difficult.
Yeah, it's just expensive.
Okay, so on to the next one here. I was looking for if I could find the specific study that made this claim, which was that keto shifts type of LDL from small and dense to large.
Yeah.
This was interesting because so I did find the study. I think it came directly from this study here,
Okay.
which says exactly that, just from small and dense, which is less risk. But then I was confused because this chart, the way I'm looking at it, doesn't it seem to show that the larger the size, the more pro-atherogenic it gets? Or what am I missing here? How am I?
Well, that chart's just dense. Oh, what? Oh, pro-atherogenic lipoproteins, anti-atherogenic. Right. So they're implying that the ones to the top and right. Yeah. So that's a good question. I guess there's a possibility. I guess it depends on when that study was done, and maybe they just maybe it's even a typo in the study.
There was a few that agreed with it. So I found this 2022, 2020, or 2020, 2022, whatever this is. I probably just don't have access.
And I don't know
to
if I really understand that chart though, because well, so they say pro and anti, right? But I think in, I don't know, when was that? That was 2015 or no, when was that one? 2000?
There's been then another one that's very similar. That's 2015.
But that one
Maybe
doesn't say which ones are atherogenic, does it?
this is true. You're right.
So I think what they're finding out is that at one point they thought it was the size that, well,
Yeah, no, I think I see where you're going. That kind of makes sense.
it's like if you're switching from LDL to VLDL, well, very low. Oh God. See, I don't know. See, this is what I hate about the world. It's kind of like, did no one think this through? Has no one, like, how can we be telling billions of people to not eat something, and it's like you can't even like write a clear sentence anywhere.
Mhm.
Because I keep thinking that, well, if it's lower density, but I think I have it backwards in my mind. So the question is, does it get more atherogenic as it goes up and to the right? Or is it
Right. And I think one thing I'm seeing here is that as you go up to the right, so LDL, IDL, VLDL contain ApoB, and that's a big one in this whole equation. Whereas HDL and LDL, LDL does, but HDL doesn't.
so the part of the claim that says that it gives you more? Oh wait, was it HDL or LDL? So where's HDL on that chart? It's down at the lower left.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. So it is saying that if you switch from LDL to HDL, then it becomes anti-atherogenic, right?
Right. That's what the chart is saying.
Okay, but doesn't that then agree? What was the main thing we came
Claim
in here for? I
was,
keep getting HDL
I know,
already.
I did, yeah, I do
Okay,
too.
so uh,
Shifts the type of
okay, now
LDL from
okay.
small to large.
LDL to HDL, high to large buoyant LDL, small dense to large buoyant.
Yeah, what's that buoyant mean? I'm not even really sure. In this
Oh, and
in
that
this
chart doesn't
context.
have, they're both LDLs for that one, but that one doesn't say whether they're buoyant.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. So this maybe it's specifically here, and
Although
I'm
you'd
reading
think
too deep
large
into it.
buoyant, you think that would be VLDL. Like you'd think they changed the term at some point.
This one is 2020, and it also says lowered levels of small, corresponding increase in concentrations of larger LDL. Again, it could still be meaning VLDL, like you said. It's 2022 say.
Which was responsible for higher levels of plasma LDL-C.
What is STLDLC?
Small dense.
Right. Yeah.
An abundance of small LDL increases the CHD.
Yeah.
It seems like at some point they flip-flopped on what is the more dangerous. High density, small.
Yeah. Right here. It says the same thing.
Low density.
Oh
2022.
wait, no, they have that. Yeah.
See,
Okay.
I almost feel like to go
I'm
through
confused.
this, we need a terminology chart
Yeah. Yeah.
where by date, right? So
By date.
you show
Terminology.
that they used to say larger LDL, and basically they probably at some point changed that to very large density lipoproteins. But almost to go into that, you'd have to go into each of these studies and say, what are the size numbers between VLDL and larger LDL? In each of those studies. So it'd almost need to be by study, by date. by term. And then see if at some point why they started thinking the less dense.
I like this. Yeah. Definitely like this. Yeah, because it's confusing to me anyway. Okay, next one was this mortality chart thing. And now, you know what? To be honest, I didn't review this before in terms of what these charts actually say, but I know that I went and collected a bunch of them.
Yeah.
So we have this at our disposal because the original question was for me. I wonder if a detailed look or association with mortality/event figures in the papers would be impactful to include. So if that's something we want to do, like someone makes a move or someone we want to flash this on the screen during the conversation, I have this that we can quickly go through to see if any one of these helps one of the cases that is being made during the conversation.
Yeah,
So,
I like that idea. It would be nice then if you would kind of look at the claims and see if there are any visuals that would go good with them. I mean, it's not a high priority, but if it doesn't take too long to kind of just look at the claims and look at the pictures and say, oh, because I do think we have one that says a correlation between saturated fats and cardiovascular disease.
there's markers and risk, but I don't
So
think
risk of CVD, that would be correlated with increased risk. So increased risk means that they did a observational study of people over time.
But does it, and that's where I don't know, this is my lack of knowledge, but is it just increased risk? Well, I guess you have
The
this
only way
here,
they
so
determine
this is
risk
the
is
difference.
population studies.
Okay,
Well, I mean, they
Not-
could have done, yeah, because they can't do random. It's either population studies or random control trials, and they really can't do random control trials of diets. So, I mean, not long-term random control trials of diets.
but I guess my question specifically is, and it might be answered here, is the risk, were they just checking, oh, you have CVD markers, higher increase of CVD markers, which is correlated with risk, rather than we actually
Well, so
wrote.
that's number 8.
Yeah, so that's what I think answers my question is. If
Yeah,
they're
right.
different,
Yeah.
that makes
The
sense.
4
then.
should be observational studies of people over time.
Yeah.
Or mostly, and we may have to, that meta study might have a combination of those two, but that claim is mostly pointing to the ones that show an increased risk of. So we could clarify that claim. I was putting the shorter text, but
Yeah.
it was all mortality risk.
Okay. Let me write this down. Graph this. Cool. That is good. Yeah, because there's quite a few, and from quite a few studies. From each one of these is from a different study. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I crossed this one out because, yeah, just risk rather than mortality incidences. Cool. This one was fun, actually. This was super interesting. Going through all the studies in this section, so the ketogenic diets regulate cardiac function section of this study.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, I'll open it up just so we show it on screen. I usually, like, when I see this, I'm like, oh yeah, that's the study, and it kind of like
Right.
makes sense. Yeah. the visual representation. Anyway, so what I did was first chunk it down into outliner text, so you can quickly go through it, and each one of these references that are in the actual page doesn't always link directly when you when you use the Google link to text thing, because the page loads and so it doesn't actually jump down to where it's supposed to. Anyway, each of these studies are imported into the graph. So when it links it here, I change that to link it to the actual study that's imported into the graph. So there's a quickly, you can navigate it this way if you want to. Now here are the related claims from Miro and TL Draw, and another link directly to the studies here. Now what I did was take ChatGPT and chuck that section in there and get ChatGPT to extract some claims to take a look at what could those claims actually be. And this is how ChatGPT framed them. And then I put in the direct quote if you want to go back to find it specifically, as well as the studies that are linked there. If there's a study that it's specifically referencing, I added it here as well. So there's quite a bit of, I'd say, technical data we can get into here if we wanted to, which is interesting. I'm not sure, like, one of the things I think you've done already is kind of abstract a few of these claims into one. So I can kind of show an example of what I mean there, which was this one. So this idea of improved cardiac metabolic efficiency is referencing these three claims, which were on that last screen. So that's something I think you've done already in a bit, but if we wanted to continue down that road, there's quite a bit of data here that we could get into. So do you have any questions on that?
Yeah, so I guess the main thing we wanted to look at there was how much of a conceptual overlap is it between this claim and the claim that says it improves markers? So a few of these, like heart failure with reduced ejection fraction. I mean, so that doesn't sound like it has anything to do with a marker. Unless within that study, they said, oh, it has this because of this. You know what I'm saying? So really the main thing is to look at is there in these study things, are there some that don't overlap with that other claim? And then which ones are those? So I guess almost for each of these studies, you have to look into and say, what did they use to determine that? Was it a CVD marker or was it separate? And I guess we don't have to go through them all. If we could just find a few that don't use a CVD marker in their analysis, then we have some evidence, right?
And that was contrasting the claim improved cardiac metabolic efficiency to the other one. What was it?
To the CVD markers, I think.
I thought there was something else. I have something in my mind that why is it not linked here, Michael?
So it's the difference between 6 and 8.1, I think, in my chart. So, or is it 7? I guess we need to distinguish between 6, 7, and 8.1.
I think my initial query was whether this was different than I'm just drawing a blank right now, sorry. I think I can find this in my TL draw. Metabolic syndrome. That was the term I was looking for. So that was my initial query. Was that claim different than this? Improved markers of metabolic syndrome, different than improved cardiac metabolic efficiency.
Yeah.
And I believe they are different. I think they're two separate claims, and I think you were saying they were similar. Is that correct?
Well, we need to know how similar they are. So to know that, like, we know what um so if we take the list of what was the claim? How was it worded?
The metabolic syndrome claim or the improved cardiac
I guess your
metabolic
wording is
efficiency?
different from my wording. Maybe we need to kind of also kind of figure out which of these two wordings we're going to use.
Yeah. This is a chart I got from ChatGPT defining inefficient cardiac metabolism versus metabolic syndrome and how it thought they were different. And based on my limited knowledge, that's kind of what I'm going off of. But this could be incorrect.
Yeah, I think it's thinking about it in a different angle. I mean, so these are two terms that summarizes a bunch of things.
Okay.
And so the question is, when you dig one level deeper, how many of those things overlap?
Right. So let
So
me
if
put
they
this
say
to the
metabolic
side.
syndrome, well, metabolic syndrome includes weight gain. Or the cardiac metabolic efficiency is weight gain one of their factors? If it is, then that's an overlap.
So it seems that I found these three for cardiac metabolic efficiency. That are different.
Preventing myocardial atrophy and failure. So unfortunately, I don't know specifically what that means. That could just be a technical term for heart attack.
Yeah, I'm on the same page with you.
So if we wanted to dig deeper in that, we'd have to look at that study and say, how did they measure this? And if they measured it because the patients lost weight, then, so that reduces your risk of this, and weight loss is something in the other one, then you know what I'm saying?
I think I do, yes. Okay. So cool. I think that should make sense to me when I come to it next time. Okay. So what did I do here? Right. In terms of weight scoring, this is when I asked you on Slack, does it bottom out? I'd be interested to see a specific example so I can kind of get a better understanding of how the scoring works.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, mathematically it doesn't bottom out. Like there's nothing in the math that does that. You can go on forever, but if no one has a claim to go deeper,
So if I have a claim, let's say. If I have. That's claim. Enter, nope, enter, there you go. You have a claim, okay. And this claim has 2 pros. What is the score of this claim?
That's just 100%. I mean, why don't you tell me the score? What would be, if you have a claim and it has 2 pieces of evidence for it and no evidence against it, what would the score be?
It's a good point. Okay, so now if it. So I guess my question was, so these are pros, say, and sorry, was that the color?
Usually it's purples or
Purple,
pros.
okay, sorry. Now, if I could just say something here, just anything, I could just fictitiously make up a random whatever.
Yeah.
That would count.
You could even just put nuh-uh.
And I guess that's what's confusing me, because for every actual, let's call this a fact. I don't know how you're going to measure that, but let's pretend it is. And this is just a bald ass assertion. So for every fact that team pro comes up with, I could just say nuh-uh, and we're just going to be 50-50 here. Is that?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like in a spreadsheet. If someone types in bad numbers, you will get a bad result.
Right. Yeah. I remember you mentioned
So
that. Yeah,
there's no. Yeah, it's like, yeah, that's the way all systems work. And there's no.
So if you
I don't
have a
know
bad
why
interlocutor,
people expect the math to solve this human problem.
yeah,
It's not within the domain. Plus the idea, it's like if I'm one person modeling my conceptual thoughts because I'm reading so many studies, I can't keep it all in my head. I'm not going to put in, I mean, if I do put in a piece of garbage, the score is going to be wrong.
yeah.
But I'm not going to put in just blatant no's and stuff like that, right? So in that use case,
I guess I'm wondering, and this is a lot of this because I haven't thought about scoring really at all. So like I'm probably coming up with my thoughts in my head are like you probably thought already 10 times over. But is there a way to put some specific criteria or constraints on what would distinguish a fact from a bald ass assertion? Is that even possible? For example,
well, the math that doesn't take into account anything of what the text is at all.
Yeah.
So it doesn't exist. All it knows is 1 pro, 1 con.
Yeah.
So mathematically, no. But also, I mean, if we're comparing this to Facebook, then if you're taking well, first of all, you're supposed to be writing a single simple claim. So then if you're going to put on meta systems in the system to prevent this type of attack, then it's easier because it's not a paragraph of information. So you limit it to, 200, 500 characters, and then you say they can't repeat a claim within an argument. So all of a sudden it's like I have to put in nuh-uh, and then I can't put in nuh-uh again. I have to do nuh-uh 2, nuh-uh 3. And if I'm only, so already it's a lot easier to prevent spamming in this system than any of the existing systems, just for the fact that you're doing single claims. So there are some natural things, but it's, when you're doing a startup or something like that, or any type of science, you test one variable at a time. If you're testing 2 or 3 variables, you don't know what it is. So trying to solve civil tax while trying to solve a mathematical way of representing the logic someone has and coming to a conclusion, to try and solve both those problems at the same time is the reason why these systems don't get built. And the reason why Marc Antoine's been spending, I mean, we've all been
Yeah.
spending 10 years on this,
Yeah.
but he's biting such a big thing. Now he's doing that because he's made lots of little things already. So
Mhm,
he's
mhm.
at that next stage, but I'm tackling an issue that he hasn't tried yet. So I need to, in order to solve this, we have to ignore the other
Right.
stuff. So,
Yeah, that makes sense.
and that's why we're using the scenario of either a person trying to think through their own thing, but I think that's not very helpful because the human brain is bad at switching between two sides of an argument quickly. I mean, we can do it, but it's painful and it's slow. So having two people do it, and then to limit having people take turns, kind of limits it some. So you're not going to waste a turn on putting in there. So that's all. That's the kind of limiting factor.
Yeah,
Plus, they
kind
don't
of
really want to look stupid if they're standing on stage doing a debate, right?
the social gaming of it. Yeah, or the
Are you really
social
going to say
game.
nah?
Yeah,
Um,
I liked actually, 6 months to a year ago where I was a lot more naive about all of these difficult problems, and it just seemed like it was just going to be very easy. But the more
uh,
you learn, the more you realize that's not the case.
yeah.
Okay, that that helps clarify that for me at
Cool.
least a bit. Now I started very briefly looking into RS Editor. That is not what I wanted to link. I wanted to link it's. I just had some random ideas, but I think I'll probably put that on the back burner until we start talking about that and bring it back up if it's still relevant.
Yeah.
Then
Okay.
I did some work on the grammar and relations specifically in this graph. So I actually ran this through GPT and put it into Mermaid, and it created
Okay.
this for me saying this is actually the relations you have. And this was this current ideal that I listed out in a previous talk. And so I just went ahead and created some specific relations that got us closer to that. And I think it'll be helpful for the longevity of this graph. And we briefly talked about this before. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think that was it for me.
Okay. So we could try and take a look at the code. Let's try and keep it to an hour because I have a doctor's appointment. In a
Okay,
bit.
perfect.
So in the next 15 minutes, I guess one thing I want to say before we get too far into the code is it's possible that we'll dig in and it's like it's too complex. Like if you were just doing React Flow, that'd be easier. But since we're trying to integrate it with Reason Score, and I don't like have Reason Score, the math documented anywhere, it may be like, oh, I can't really do anything. Have you kind of downloaded the code and got an IDE up and running?
I do, yeah.
Let's go ahead and have you share screen again,
Okay,
and I'll tell you where to go. I think it sticks better in muscle memory
very good point.
if you're the one driving around.
Yeah, I definitely agree.
Okay, so yeah, go ahead and open that source folder. That's where all the meat is. Yeah, and open up app. So shrink those folders up towards just the app folder. Oh, that is a folder. Okay. App. So the reason score folder is all the math and kind of a data store for storing reason score. And I used to have that in a separate library, but it's too time consuming to maintain two separate libraries and handle the interaction. So I just dumped the code in here. And then later we'll want to extract it out so that people can play with the math without having to have a UI involved, or if they want to
That
build their
makes
own
sense.
UIs. But and then Bentley one. So I guess what I want to do with this code is I wanted us to be able to have like multiple playgrounds. So this is the
Yep.
Next.js app. So the URL, the route I was playing in was Bentley one. And if we wanted to keep our code separate, then you could make a Michael folder, and you could even copy that whole Bentley one folder and play around with that. I
That
know we
makes
could do
sense.
branches, but sometimes it's nice to have them both running at the same time. So that's the only reason for that logic. And then if you open up Bentley one, I can show you.
I'm just loading up something here.
So see, is the starter page index page.tsx? Yeah. So yeah, this is just going through the nodes that I have, and I'll show you where I get those in a second, and throwing them up on the screen inside a React Flow object.
Right.
And making the mini map and the control. So this is just kind of formatting the screen and throwing the data in. So that's all pretty easy. The interesting things in here though is that I have my own custom node. And do I have a custom edge? I don't know why I have a edge there. Oh, I did have to make a custom edge because when I have the arrows go into a node point, I want them to stack up next to each other.
Right.
So instead of having them all end at the point, I count how many they are and I have them have the endpoints move down. Maybe that'd be easier if we
Interesting.
Yes, that's why I made a custom edge. And then the custom node itself is so that we have that to draw the SVGs of those lines being squished together and showing the math in the lines.
I have this loaded if you want to
Yeah.
look at it.
So you see those three on the far right, the way so that the node, yeah, see how the node actually goes all the way to the right where those black arrows are?
Yeah, I was
Yeah,
looking
so
at
that's
that.
all
Yeah.
the node on the inside.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So these edges, or what do they call them? Marker? No, I forget what these are called specifically here.
Yeah, I
But
can't remember the term for them, but they're attachment points or something.
those three attachments points are for this node.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the one on the node, the attachment point on the right is for any children that come into it. The attachment node on the left is for anything it's an adult of, so it's pointed to its parent, and it can have multiple parents.
It
And then that
can or cannot.
can.
And
then that top pullet, the top attachment point is for any. So there's two, and I may have to rethink this. There are two ways a claim can affect its parent. One is I call confidence, and one is called relevance, or I call importance, right? So if it's confidence or kind of like a truth claim, then it hits that right node. If it's importance or relevance, then it's that top node. And that way it shows the math where the relevance gets affected after all the other calculations happen. So all the children come in, you calculate all the scores to figure out what your resulting confidence is. And then that confidence is either or the importance is then multiplied. The confidence is multiplied by the importance. So it's either increased or decreased coming out of the math. Going into its parent.
okay, so confidence is on the right here.
Yeah.
Importance is on the top.
Yeah.
Is confidence by default like 100%? Kind of like the example we were talking about?
Yeah. So like if you look at those three on the right, each of them is just a fully filled bar. So and it'd be nice to actually visually later on, I'm going to have it look like there's an emitter or something to where the far right of those nodes at the top, you can see that they're emitting that orange or purple line.
Like here or here, sorry.
Well, yeah, like right. I mean, it would be on the node itself in the middle of the node. That
the middle
attachment
of
point is where it's coming out, but that whole
here.
top line of the node, the whole
Yeah.
top to the right of that. I'll go to the beginning of that line. Yeah, so like right there, it's coming out of nothing. And it'd be nice to just have something that looks like this is the beginning of it. Does that make sense? To show that this node is generating that weight, that confidence.
Maybe it would help me understand if this was confidence was 50% or half. How
Well,
would
so
that
it's
change?
if it has no children, it's always 100%.
Right. Right. Yeah. It's based on,
So it'll
yeah.
always be, oh, I'm starting a new line. So it might just be like a gray square with a little like, just something to give when people are looking at, they can see, oh, this is where it's all starting.
Yeah, I think I kind of understand, but
It's not a big
seeing
deal.
it big,
That's kind of
seeing
future
it.
stuff.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
So the important thing that we want to get to, though, if I can, let me show you. Go ahead back to that display, and then if you want to drag. So if you go to one of those attachment points and you start dragging a line, you'll see a little line kind of coming out. So what we want to do is the first thing we want to do is make it to where we can attach two nodes together that aren't currently attached. And I don't remember what they call that in React Flow, but there's examples of handling that on the website.
I saw a couple of them. Yeah.
So we need to like watch for that event and then update the React code. So let me go ahead and show you where the data comes in for this screen. So if you want to go back to the code, and it does attach. Before it was crashing when that happened, but
It seemed to attach to some places, but not
yeah,
to
also
others.
yeah, some are outgoing and some are incoming. So you can only attach an outgoing to an incoming.
Okay, cool. So you have that already in there.
Yeah.
There's
That
one
was
thing.
one of the default settings, and I just made them one way.
Right.
So yeah. Yeah, so it's drawing the lines, it's just not affecting the math or drawing anything else. Because it's not using my custom line drawing things.
Right.
I didn't even
Yeah.
know that was working. It used to crash.
Okay, so you want to be able to.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. We might. I mean, I was thinking we need to do the line drawing, but it's almost like we need to be able to have an empty node that doesn't go anywhere first. So I don't know which is more important. And then there's so many ways you could do it, right? So we could have it to where if you hover over one of those nodes, maybe a little on the right hand side, maybe a little purple plus sign appears and a little orange plus sign appears, and you can click that to create a pro or a con, right?
Yeah, that's actually what I was looking at as well. Just with these ideas. Keep clicking on things that I don't want to. So if the top right maybe has something to you click on and drag to add a pro, and the the right bottom has a con, kind of like what you're saying. Were you saying like on hover it would show up, or it would just always be there, or
I think it would get pretty messy if they were always there. So I think on
yeah.
hover. Now
Okay.
that means it's not really easy to use for mobile. But as it is right now, it's not a good
Good point.
mobile display. So I think I've gone back on my initial demands and said the editor will be mobile. I mean, won't be mobile optimized.
Right.
So that'll be
There
okay.
is one other option where if you just had the right attachment thing, and as you dropped it, like a dialog would show up saying, is this a pro or is this a con? So that would limit the user the UI.
We could
a little
also
bit.
have 2 points, one for pros and one for cons. And it's probably not obvious, but they're actually sorted to where the cons are on top and the pros are on the bottom. So it could just be 2 attachment points, and one could, we could color them to where one's a purple attachment point and one's a orange attachment point. What I
Mhm.
don't know is from the React flow, how easy it is to say, oh, if you drag something and then something appears there. I think that's fairly easy.
When you let go.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's an
they
example
have that as
already.
an example in there, don't
Add
they?
node on edge drop. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so let's maybe we need to do it that way and make, well, I'm just trying to think of whether we want to make 2 attachment points now, or see, the problem is in the system, I need to have all of those. I need to calculate the positions and position all of those. So does that mean for one attachment point to work, I need to know all the other attachment points children, but I think I do know that already. So I guess for now, yeah, the good thing would be for you to set it up so that if you drag that point out, it'll create a new node, and we can have it somehow where you ask it whether it's pro or con. And then later on we could separate it out to 2 attachment points if we want.
Cool. So this guy first.
Yeah. Well, okay, that's yeah. That's probably the right way to do it.
Do you have any specific libraries you use for such things? Like in our Rome uses Blueprint.js, but like, is there anything used for dialog boxes and what have you that you would like to use?
I tend to use Bootstrap.
Okay.
But I don't know that it even really has a dialog box. But really, kind of
Right.
what I think it is that you would have the node come up, just have the current node appear, and then what we'll do is we'll make it to where the node, if it doesn't know whether it's a pro or a con, it would render a a toggle or a button.
I see.
So rather
Okay.
than having a separate dialog, I think
Yeah.
we'll have enough room to just do it all in the node itself.
So neutral node with picker or something
Yeah.
toggle. So yeah.
And just to be
Go ahead.
clear, it would be the existing node. The existing node would detect, I don't know. That's what you mean by neutral. It's a state of a node as opposed to a type of node. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So like if node type is undefined or null, kind of.
If my, so yeah, the in the that's gonna be a problem. Maybe not. So right now, whether something is a pro or a con is a boolean. It's a pro question mark. True is pro, false is. So yeah, we would need to use
Everything.
undefined. We could use null, but I just use undefined. So if is pro is undefined, I just don't know how. Everywhere in my code it has to be true or false. So I don't know when you first
Right.
drag it whether it's gonna. I mean, it could probably detect that it actually doesn't have any a node. It doesn't have, well, I guess when I say node, we're gonna have conflating terms because within there's the nodes within React Flow, and then there's the nodes within Reason Score itself. Because I might call those claims everywhere. So the node might come out and notice I don't have a claim. And so it does a UI to ask you some questions about starting the claim. And then once you fill out that UI, it generates the claim, adds it to Reason Score, and then updates its display.
Okay. I think that makes sense. Cool. Cool.
If you want to toggle back over to the code, I could show you where. Okay, so there's a file called pagedata.typescript in that Bentley 1 folder. Okay, this is A lot of code. So go back up a little bit. Well, yeah, so on this file, there's that kind of blanks. Maybe it would be easier if I was doing it, but scroll down a little bit until you see a whole bunch of wait, stop right there. So see that positions, const positions? That is the X and Y coordinates of everything of those nodes on the screen. And I'm adding that because reason score itself doesn't have XY positions because it's really just math.
Right.
So those are the IDs of the claims. In reason score, oftentimes the claims have kind of a number ID, but for my demo code, I actually named them, so it's easier to kind of figure out what's going on.
Right. Yeah.
So those are the IDs, and they just happen to be legible in this case. So that's some data for the positioning. Pull back up the Explorer on the, yeah, and then there's a RS data, so 2 files down from the one you're on. This is the reason scores. I was gonna say JSON. I guess it is JSON, but it's an object. It's JSON in there. Anyway, so that's the data from the reason score system.
Directly, like one for one.
Yeah. So you'll later on you'll be instantiating or in the page data, I instantiate a reason score calculator, and this is the data that it works off of, and this is the data it produces. So I took this dump off the demo on reasonscore.com and then threw it in here, added the positions separately because I didn't want to muck with this data. Yeah, so that's kind of where it is. So if you go back to the page data .ts, go up to the top. I have some is functions. Have you done a lot of TypeScript? Do you know what those generally are?
Is that just like declaring what type it is?
Well, it's actually asking the question. So you can do if on an if step, you can do if is confidence edge data, then do this, or if it's relevance, then so you can use that function in an if statement in TypeScript. Anyways, those are those are kind of like helper functions. And then I have some interfaces, which in TypeScript.
Oh, I wasn't looking. I thought this was, yeah. So go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. And then, so those are the interfaces that have, okay, this is the data the display node has, that's the confidence edge. So that's additional data for so I call the nodes for React Flow, I call those display nodes to separate them from the reason score has its own like data nodes.
Display node equals React node. Cool. Yeah.
And then, and we also have edges both in reason score and in React Flow, of course. So a lot of times when I say data, well, I guess that's obvious. It's data as opposed to an actual object. I mean, it is an object of data, but it has no functions on it. So I do data transferred objects is the pattern I'm using. So you don't ever have a class that has its own, you don't mix data and functions in the same class. It's either a data object or it's functions you use that take in a data object, manipulate and spit it back out. So it's not object-oriented programming in traditional sense.
You said it was data transfer object?
Yeah, DTO or data transfer
DTO.
objects.
Perfect. I can look that up then, please. Helpful.
So yeah, these are a whole bunch of interfaces. So let's go down below this, go below that positions. Yeah. So get edges and nodes. So this is something called by the This is the function that I call to gather up all this data. It combines those positions along with the data from the RS data file, and then it does a few things to kind of like it adds some stuff in. So those in reason score, it's the math is all event driven. So that action, so line 102, I have an array of actions. Those are the commands that you use to send new nodes into reason score. So like you can see the top one, I'm adding a claim and then I'm adding an edge. You see at the very far
yeah.
left of that, the type is add claim and add edge.
Or the type is add claim. Like, oh, this guy.
Yeah, at the very front of it. Yeah. So that's a message. The message type is add claim, and then after that comma is the data that I'm adding. So it's a new data, and I'm just giving it an ID of test. The text is test. So I was just mucking around, but basically I had two claims, and if you look back at the thing, those are those two cons that are empty. Those two claims.
I see. Okay.
So those are the commands to generate those. And I didn't really care what the text was. I just needed an example of multiple claims going into one thing. So I just threw two more in there. But that gives you an idea on how to build an action and reason score. And then if you toggle back to the code, you can see on line 108, I'm saying calculate score actions, and I'm sending those actions into the reason score. Okay, so yeah, so the reason score math calculations, the data store for reason score, I'm calling it a repository because it's a data repository. That's probably a bad name because, in GitHub you have a repository of code, right?
Yeah.
I probably need to call it a data store or something. Anyways, but in the current terminology, it's a repository. And so you call the calculate actions and you send it the actions and you send it the repository. It'll put all that, it'll run those actions into the repository, and then you can then ask the repository for the output. But it's going to be, it's probably more complicated than you could get in one sitting. What I might suggest is that you just kind of go with what little I've told you, which isn't enough. And then figure out where in that can you show me the list of files again? So scroll up a little bit. Let's look at the page I keep forgetting what they call I guess it's page.tsx.
Is the
So
index,
somewhere
yeah.
in there, we will be listening to an event that is the drop of the line.
Mhm.
So
Are you all ready, or that's what we have to do?
that's the next step. So that's the thing you'll be adding is you'll need to look in the React Flow documentation and they'll have a demo and say, this is when you drop the line, this is what the code looks like. You create an event off the something, which I don't know.
This guy.
Yeah.
On
Add
connection
node on
stop.
edge drop. Yeah. So what you need to do is kind of plug in that function and see if you can get it working. The problem is that you probably won't be able to hook it up to the reason score code because I haven't what I showed you right now. I'd be surprised if you could figure it out based on what little I've shown you. but maybe you can get it at least working to where when you drag and drop it, it pops a node up there that maybe doesn't. The nodes, if the current nodes, they may not work at all because it doesn't have any reason score data with it. So you might have to use a standard node, a standard React Flow node for now. But it'd be good to see if you can get that working.
Where's your custom node again? Sorry.
So it's in there somewhere. So node display is my custom node. And then edge display is the custom edge. And they're in a separate file than, yeah, the node display. Yep. So that's my custom node. So if you can get that working, then that'd be great. Maybe you can throw in some dummy data, or maybe it won't actually bomb if you use it without all the data from reason score. But if not, you could use the regular kind of default node, I think.
That sounds good.
Just
Yeah,
get that working. That'd be great.
I would love to try.
And then go ahead and start a new branch. Just, you know, it could be the Michael branch or whatever. Kind of keep it separate from main for now. And then, yeah, just let me know when you have the inevitable questions and get stuck.
Sounds good. Michael branch has been initiated.
Cool. All right, man. Well,
No,
I gotta head out to a doctor's appointment. So
okay, that was very helpful. Thank you. And yeah, I'll just see what I can do there.
cool. Let me know how it
Okay.
goes.
Till next time.